Good afternoon, Dr. Birch.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our May HSAC meeting. We will officially begin the meeting as soon as we have a quorum. Thank you for your patience. Again, welcome everyone to our May HSAC meeting. We are just waiting until we have a quorum and then we'll officially start the meeting. Thank you. Ruby, are we getting close?
Yes, I'm waiting for 2 more HSAC members to join.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, we have quorum.
Thank you, Ruby, and welcome everyone to our May HSAC meeting. We will officially start this meeting. I want to just briefly remind everyone that if you're not speaking, stay on mute. You're welcome to have your video on or off, your preference, although we like to see your smiling faces occasionally. I want to read our goals. We want to finish the job of ending chronic homelessness, prevent and end veterans homelessness, prevent and end homelessness for families, youth, and children, and set a path to ending all types of homelessness. I'm filling in for our chair today because she had a family emergency come up all of a sudden, and so she's unable to be here with us completely. She may be in and out by phone, but I'm going to be chairing the meeting for you today. So we will start with our minutes. Hopefully everyone had a chance to look over the minutes. Are there any corrections or additions for the minutes from the April 27th meeting?
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair Tripp. This is Vega Swepson. In terms of a correction for the minutes under the committee members present, I didn't see my name indicated for April 27th meeting.
Okay, we'll make a note to get that corrected.
Thank you.
Any other additions or corrections? Well, may I have a motion to accept these minutes with the noted correction of adding Ms. Swepson to the attendees?
This is Ryan. I move to approve.
Thank you. And may I have a second?
Second.
And that was Drew Cummings seconding. Vote yay in the chat. Yes in the chat if you agree. Nay if you do not agree. It looks like the minutes have approved. Dr. Birch, do you agree?
Yes, Madam Vice Chair. And if you will remind everyone that if when Ruby puts that up, to make sure they sign in so I can put them in and show them present.
Correct, that's a good point. So Ruby is going to put in the link to sign in for the meeting. And so when you get that, please go ahead and fill that out because that's how we take attendance for this meeting. Thank you for that. Okay, I am catching up. I apologize if I seem a little bit disorganized because I found out about 15 minutes before this meeting started that I would be chairing. So I'm not completely up to speed on everything. Ruby, do we have anyone signed up for public comments?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, in that case, we will move on to the next item number 4, our performance management quarterly report. And for that, we have the chair of that committee, Jonathan Crooms.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jonathan Crooms with Durham County Veterans Services and current chair of the Performance Management Subcommittee. It has been a very busy start to the year for the Performance Management Subcommittee, and I'll just do a very brief summary of some of the things that we have been working on, most of which has already been presented to the larger HSAC. But certainly you all know that a couple months ago, we completed our spring evaluation of the CoC funded projects and presented that to the HSAC in the March meeting. The other thing that we have been working on very diligently, which we also presented to HSAC in the March meeting, was amending the benchmarks for performance for all of our different types of our homeless projects. They had not been amended since 2014, and so we presented those, studied it, presented it, made a recommendation to the larger body, which was adopted also in March. And following up with that, last Friday, Community Development Department staff member Lloyd Schmeidler and myself led a session where we went over the new benchmarks again, specifically for the projects, gave them the opportunity to ask some additional questions, as well as we have solicited some feedback from the projects about how it would be most helpful for them as we figure out how we're going to implement those benchmarks in the most helpful way for the system and for our projects. The other thing that we have been doing, we are already getting ready for some fall scoring. We have adopted a scorecard that we're going to use to evaluate any new project applications we get when we begin scoring in the fall. The last thing that I want to update everyone on is you may remember back in March when we presented the spring CoC evaluation results, we also informed the larger body that we were not able to score the Durham Crisis Response Center's application due to some challenges that the organization is having. We have since been informed that come next year, at the end of their funding, the Durham Crisis Response Center will not be applying for any renewal funding. And so at this time, no further conversation about the possibility of reallocating those funds will be needed. The other thing that the Performance Management Subcommittee has done in regard to this development is that we have adopted a motion to publicly thank the Durham Crisis Response Center for applying and operating their homeless services project, and to thank them for their good work and pledge any additional support that we could provide as they go into the final year of their funding. That's what I have for everybody, and delighted to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Jonathan? Okay, in that case, thank you for your report, Jonathan.
I do have a quick question, Jonathan, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So, I thought I heard you say that there's no concern about reallocation. Does that mean that we think they'll spend out the current grant on allowable uses, or is there any concern about whether they can spend out the current grant based on their application?
So when I spoke of reallocation, certainly one of the things that we have the ability to do is if a project is not performing, up to standards, we can recommend a reallocation of funds. And so there was the possibility that discussion would be needed. So, to answer your question, we're, as far as I know, I don't think that there's any other issue for continuing to spend out. It's just when we do the evaluations for that chunk of funding, we're not going to have to look at providing them to another organization because they're not going to be applying for renewal funding.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Okay. Our next item on the agenda is a presentation from Legal Aid Emergency Rental Assistance, but I don't think our speaker is here yet. Is that correct, Ruby? I'm not seeing her on the participants list.
I know she said she might be on at about 3:20. She'll pick up children from school.
All right, that's cool. Well, we will move ahead then to item number 6, which is be setting priorities for new and reallocated CoC funding. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development has made strategic resource allocation of its targeted homeless assistance funding one of its priorities. The Policy and Planning Subcommittee approved the recommended priority of the CoC staff at the subcommittee's meeting on May 9th and seeks approval of this priority by the full CoC and HSAC for the use of reallocated and new permanent housing bonus funds in the upcoming 2022 CoC homeless grants competition. This will require a formal vote by the HSAC. So Lloyd Schmeidler will be presenting, and you have the floor when you're ready.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lloyd Schmeidler with the Community Development Department. The memo that contained the funding recommendation, the priority recommendation, was sent out to the CoC and the HSAC with the agenda for today's meeting. The Policy and Planning Committee approved the recommendation and is forwarding it to the HSAC and the CoC for adoption. And the recommendation specifically is that permanent supportive housing for persons who meet the definition of an eligible dedicated plus project participant should be the priority for funds available through reallocation and any permanent housing bonus available in the 2022 Continuum of Care Homeless Grants Competition. That competition we expect will begin. We expect HUD to release a notice of funding opportunity in July with a deadline for submitting our local continuum of care applications by the end of September. We have begun the process of soliciting pre-applications from interested organizations and projects. And so it would be helpful to be able to publicize this recommended priority to the continuum of care in these next weeks. As has already been noted by Jonathan in his report, we will have some funds available for a reallocation project in addition to the expected permanent housing bonus, and we expect the reallocation of amount of over $167,000 to potentially be available in Tier 1 funding if HUD again uses 100% threshold for Tier 1 funding, 100% of what is needed to fully fund all of our renewal projects. That would enable us to put the reallocated funds into Tier 1 as well. And at this time, I would welcome comments by Sharita McCullers, the Chair of Policy and Planning, who is forwarding the funding recommendation for the HSAC and the CoC's consideration.
Hi, everybody. This is Sharita. We had a very robust conversation about this funding recommendation, and we are standing in support with our lead agency as it relates to this dedicated for us and permanent supportive housing recommendation from the Community Development Department. I'm sorry, I'm running back and forth, y'all, so I got to get my thoughts together. I will entertain any questions as well that anybody may have. Yeah, that's where we are. Anybody have any questions? Does everybody remember what dedicated plus means? Because that's something a few months ago we adopted as a tool we would use, and essentially what it does is lowers the It simplifies the documentation process for people who are trying to prove that they are chronically homeless. Like, so they can't recall, what places they stayed at in the process of the meeting that 365-day requirement. There are some different thresholds for proof that will allow us to be able to serve those people, even with, maybe some of the information not all being there exactly correctly, and allow them to be able to self-declare that time. Is that correct, Hanalea? I think that's the population that we're targeting specifically.
That's correct. It just provides us a bit more flexibility in terms of certain types of documentation in order to reduce barriers to serving folks that are chronically homeless but may not have all their documentation together.
This is an item requiring us to vote. So, Helen, if nobody has any questions, I guess I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sheree. As she said, this is an item requiring a vote. You should have received the information in email yesterday that explains what Lloyd was talking about. So I will, if there is no discussion, I will entertain a motion to accept the priorities for new and reallocated CoC projects as presented.
Madam Chair, this is Jonathan Crooms. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the priorities that's as set forth in the memo that was sent out with our agenda today.
Thank you, Jonathan. Do we have a second?
This is Ryan. I'll second.
Thank you, Ryan. Cast your vote in the chat. Yes, if you agree to adopt these priorities. Nay, if you disagree. Abstain if you need to. Mr. Secretary, do we have, it looks like it passed to me. Do you agree? All I see are yeses, so I'm going to assume at this point that it passed. But thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry, you agree. Thank you for your vote. I see that Ms. D'Amato has been able to join us, so we will move back to item number 5, the legal aid emergency rental assistance. And we are glad to have you with us today. So.
Hello. I will always start this off by giving my Chatham County internet disclaimer. And so I am home with a kid who has COVID. And so that means that I am stuck on my Chatham County internet. And so if I start to go out, then I will first try to turn off my video, and then I might need to switch to a hotspot. And so bear with me. I will try to be quick, and then I can usually listen to questions a lot more easily. So I had, so again, I'm Sarah D'Amato. I'm the program director of the Legal Aid Eviction Diversion Program out of the Durham office. And most of y'all know that our program is pretty much funded by the city council. We did have a 3-year contract, and then there was an amendment. And so that amendment that was added at the beginning of the year, increased the funding to allow us to have an additional 2 to 3 more attorneys and 2 to 3 more people in the courthouse. And that's for an additional $1 million over the next 2 years on top of what we had for the additional contract. So right now, we are up to about 8 attorneys, 6, 7, 8. Yes, so 8 folks, and then we will be getting 2 more attorneys starting in June. One will start in June, and another will start in July. We have currently 3 support staff. 4. We've added a lot of people right now, and then we're adding another 2 people in the next month. And so that brings our team, including our community resource coordinator, who's also, I invited him to join this meeting today. So that puts our team at this point at about 15, I think, if I'm doing my math. They always told us in law school that lawyers shouldn't do math in public. And so bear with me if those numbers don't add up. But anyway, so yeah, we've got a really robust team for the eviction diversion part of the team. What I've been asked to talk about at this point is the Durham Rent Relief Program, which was it was administered by Legal Aid of North Carolina. That was the city of Durham. They had their federal ERAP funds. The first round, as y'all know, or likely know, was administered by the county. And then the second round was administered by our organization with Legal Aid. So even though I'm with Legal Aid, the rent relief division was sort of a separate division. And so we were able to assist folks even if they weren't clients of ours. And so now that program, they have general background. It opened up January 13th, and we had to close it on February 6th because we already anticipated that we were going to spend the $6 million that had been allotted to us. And so they are still processing those funds. They sort of unofficially closed that program up last week, even though they are still processing a few more applications through that. So so that's the Durham Rent Relief Program. And again, that was $6 million. That was federal ERAP funds that were dedicated to City of Durham residents facing eviction who had gotten behind because of COVID from one reason or another. So I had been asked to give some updates as to how many people had been assisted, what the program looked like. So I will share with you the numbers that I have. And then if folks have questions, then you can definitely, I'll do my best to answer those. What we know right now, as of today, it looks like 735 households have been served. The acceptance rate, in the sense of based on the number of applications and the number of folks that were approved, is at about 82%. And so the average amount awarded was $6,384. And the average, so that turns out to be about an average, the average award was about 6 months rent and then about 1 month utilities. So again, the program did allow for rent assistance and then also utilities. At this point, where is my other number? At this point, $4,453,476 has been spent towards rent and $238,000 in utilities. So we've only got a little bit left by the time you deal with the administrative costs. So I think, where did I write it down? Yeah, so I think we've got about $200,000, $300,000 more to spend based on the applications that we have. So as for applications, it's still kind of hard to tell at this point because there were some multiple duplicate applications. There was a purge of a lot of applications where there was no movement on, but some of the data is still, we're still trying to figure some of that out. But it looks like there were probably, by the time you get rid of all of the duplicates or the applications that were withdrawn, you're probably looking at about 4,000 applications for the rent assistance during that time. And so a lot of people are not getting served. The majority of the people that are getting assistance now were people who, when the program opened at the beginning and middle of January, were facing eviction at that time. So if they were not facing eviction at that time, then they're between the timing of their application and the lack of eviction, they were lower down on the priority list. And so a lot of the people who are getting denied right now are people who maybe applied back in January, but did not have, maybe they were only behind 1 month and they weren't yet facing eviction. So we are starting to see the effect of that. And so if anybody has questions about the rent relief stuff, then I could talk about that and then talk about what it looks like from our eviction diversion program, the results that we're seeing with that. So does anybody have any questions about the rent relief program?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So I just need to make sure first that I heard that correctly. So you said that the people who maybe applied in January are getting some of them, depending on their circumstances, are getting denials now. And if that is what you just said, what happens in the meantime, in that time span? Like, is there a mediation with the landlord, like waiting to get a response, or the person just like gets evicted? Do you know?
Yeah, so what we are seeing now is an increase in eviction filings against people who are now learning that they are not getting money and the landlord had held off on those evictions. And so we are seeing that. Unfortunately, in terms of mediation, there's not, to my knowledge, a lot of other funding support. And so in many cases, the extent of the mediation really depends on the availability of other funding in the community to pay past due amounts. The sad thing about it as well is that a lot of times when a tenant gets behind for 1 month, then some of the bigger landlords have a portal, and that portal then locks them out. So then you can't even make a partial payment. And so people then become even more behind, even though they could make, a $500 payment every 2 weeks, but their landlord doesn't accept it because they don't want to accept the partial payment. As to how many people, your question about how many people are in that predicament, I mean, I would say that you're probably talking about at least 1,000 applicants, at least 1,000 households. Because if about 4,000 people had applied, then 1,000, 700, 800 have been assisted. It might even be more than that.
Oh, you just took my breath away. You just took my breath away because it is not pretty on this side of homelessness right now. And so what I'm hearing is that 1,000 or more people, 1,000 or more households are in this situation, and we don't have a plan. or a solution. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of my job right now involves telling people that we can help them if they get filed on, but then once they get filed on, unless they come up with all the money, there's not much that we can do. Which when you take that and combine it with the fact that housing costs have increased and it, even a rental application costs $75. It is leaving a lot of people imminently homeless.
Any other questions for Ms. D'Amato?
I had my hand raised. This is Tracy with Alliance Health. I was just wondering, have you seen a trend with any particular property management company or landlords who weren't willing to work with you all to assist some of the applicants with their rent applications?
I mean, I will say that there are a few property owners who, unfortunately, they were trying to work with their tenants. And then because there were just so many people facing eviction, they actually filed to evict them in order to hopefully get the priority. And then it turns out that they were still too late for that. So there have been a few landlords. I know, Duke Manor, Colonial Apartments, that organization. There's a few other a few other LaSalle, a few other apartments that are managed by the same group. They have generally been really helpful and really, they'll accept the money. A lot of the bigger landlords, the bigger corporations, one of the things that we are seeing, unfortunately, is that they're choosing not to accept the money. The rent relief program did allow for tenants to get paid directly. And then they could use that money towards paying off their balance directly with the landlord or using it for future housing. We've seen a good handful of cases. I mean, I've got 3 or 4 clients myself where the landlord would not accept the money in order to keep the tenant housed. And so then the tenant usually was padlocked out. Or there was a judgment and they moved out. And then the landlord was still trying to collect the money that they had just refused to accept. And then one client of mine had a check for $15,000 and the landlord would not take it. And then after she moved out, now they've been sending notices to collect on that balance.
That's unfortunate. I was just wondering also, again, was there any parallel process or processes to reach out and educate landlords to inform them about the process or the program to kind of help, encourage them to participate in any way? Because it seems like a lot of individuals who have been left out due to just lack of information or education about the program or just unwillingness overall. We do know of some landlords in Durham that were cited in the News and Observer's article who just refused to receive this type of funding, but I just didn't know whether or not this was also like a parallel process to educate them also about the program.
Yeah, we tried. I think part of the difficulty was that by the time this program got started, there had been already sort of 2 programs ahead of it that were also providing funding for landlords, and many landlords kind of felt, well, what I heard was, this isn't going to help somebody, it's just another Band-Aid, right? And so they may have already accepted rent relief you know, or ERAP or the CBCG, I mix up those letters all the time. They had accepted that money before and didn't want those restrictions. Many of the landlords who did not participate this time, it wasn't because of lack of education or lack of cooperation, as much as it was they still wanted to be able to get their property and get their money. And so and that those are because there was, I mean, rent is going up, right? So every time you evict, you get to raise your rent. And so for some folks, it was more lucrative for them to try to collect the money, and then also, you know, raise the rent another $100 or $200.
Madam Vice Chair, we have comments and questions in chat.
Yes, and Drew has his hand raised, so we go with that.
Okay, you gonna go Drew first? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate this presentation, Drew Cummings in the County Manager's Office. I think it's really interesting that all of the different kind of stages of the ERAP funding represent, I think, by far the largest kind of COVID assistance program that Durham has enacted. And every organization, I mean, a lot of it went out through DSS, and you all remember the reports we got on that, how quickly all of that money went out the door. And it seems like the same has been true with legal aid, and now it's about run out. One thing, as I'm just sort of observing that and observing that from my vantage point, sort of continued support for this has not gotten, you know, it's not on a lot of radar screens at the moment, but may need to be as a possible kind of something that may need to be extended. The other thing I wanted to, you know, it's easy for people to assume, oh, the economy has rebounded, you know, anybody who wants a job can have a job, right? But if you lost your job for a while and are $15,000 behind in rent, there's still no way, right, even with a new job, that you'll be able to kind of pay that back and stay in your current place if your landlord is intent on evicting you. I don't know that it's, you know, I've had a lot of conversations with folks about how, you know, because you get evicted does not necessarily mean you will become homeless, right? There may be a variety of other things that happen, but it probably is true that it is true, right? That's still a very traumatic and dislocating kind of experience for people to go through, even if they, you know, have found a new job, and even if they somehow manage somewhere in or around Durham, manage to find a new place to live. This is still, you know, really difficult process to go through.
Yeah, I think one thing of note on that is that who we see typically as being the most likely to actually end up homeless are the folks who are renting at that lower rental rate space. Not to call out names, but Rick Souls is a prime example. So when they get evicted out of his properties, then the amount of available properties that are quote unquote affordable become even more limited. And so those are the folks who often end up in a rooming house. And the rooming houses are also a challenge because of the way they are. And so once people are pushed out of that market, those are the folks I find are most likely to actually end up not being housed. The other factor is that there are people who have Section 8 vouchers who may have lost those vouchers as they're trying to find new housing. And so if they have lost a voucher and they're on a limited income, then those folks also are struggling to find housing. The single father with kids right now, they have a hard time finding housing in shelters or in the rooming houses. So that tends to be, I think, of the folks that we are looking at a lot of times are individuals in that situation, or folks who are disabled, especially disabled and have children, because then they need a larger place with a fixed income and that is accessible.
We have a few questions in the chat. I think Ricky's question may have been answered, but I'll ask just to be sure. She was asking if the information that you presented is available in a PowerPoint or PDF, because there were a lot of numbers thrown out. But then I saw that Ruby had put numbers in the chat. So I'm not sure, is that the answer to Ricky's question, or is that something else?
I think so, but I'm glad to, at the end of this, draft up an email to put those numbers in and circulate.
That would be amazing. Thank you. Rita asked, do we have enough eviction diversion resources to lessen the impact of this?
So I think the answer to that question is it depends on what you consider a resource, right? What we are finding is that I feel, generally speaking, that right now, especially with the increased funding for our legal program, I feel like we've got some good legal resources, and we are well prepared and have ample resources to assist more people who are facing eviction. The resources that we don't have are temporary housing, assistance with security deposits, assistance with application fees. That is sorely lacking. Storage. Where do people put their stuff when they are evicted? And I think there's a mention here about the vast majority of people who are evicted do not become homeless. And I think that what we see in our experience is they might be living in a car or living with a friend for about a month or so until they find new housing. So it might not be that they are permanently homeless or even for a longer amount of time, but storage, people putting their stuff in storage. And then when they do get a new place, then they have to get their stuff out of storage, and then they don't have the money to pay the storage fees on top of the application fees and the security deposit. I mean, I consider myself pretty lucky, and I also know that if I had to come up with $1,200 first month's rent plus $1,200 security deposit plus $200 for application fees all right now, that's a little bit of a stretch. And so I think that that's really those are the resources that we don't have. And so I can keep people in their houses and extend their cases through my legal work. But at the end of the day, many of those cases come to a place where they are going to have to move out. And we don't have the resources where there's not enough rental properties around that are financially accessible to the majority of people who are facing eviction.
I absolutely agree. When I was asking that question about capital, I wasn't just talking about finances. I was talking about manpower. Like, do you have enough attorneys that if 1,000 people needed legal aid services for eviction diversion, would you be able to actually assist them?
The good thing is that and I've got some other information to share about our actual eviction diversion program and the numbers that we are, what we did last year and what we're on pace so far to do this year. So I can share those in a moment, maybe once we get through the rest of the questions, and then that way y'all can have an idea as to the types of cases that we're looking at. Make sure I got all the other questions. Yeah, I think I did. So let me just tell you, and I can also put this information in the email that I share around. Last year, our program, sorry, let's see. No, let me just go for first quarter this year. We opened about 80 to 100 cases each month. So, and again, legal aid, we are limited by income. And so it is not, we unfortunately cannot represent everybody facing income eviction. So, but we still, I think the last, pre-COVID estimate is that we do end up representing about 10% of the folks facing eviction. Hopefully we will do a little bit more with that. And so on average, in about half of the cases that we have, we are able to close that case, preserving the tenancy. And that's the goal with the city. The city grants, they want us to have about 50% of our cases that we open that we end up keeping the person housed in that particular house. And then we had about 60%, give or take, of cases that we were able to close where there was no eviction judgment. So the way that somebody could avoid a judgment against them would be to either pay everything or to move out, or sometimes we just win in court. And so they haven't had to pay and they haven't had to move out, but we just win. So that would mean a case would be dismissed. And so that's about where we are. And so if you figure about 100 new cases a month, we end up, we're going to be on track for about 1,200 or so cases for the year. What we're hoping to do, though, this year in terms of resources is not open up as many cases for total representation, but just to be able to assist people and give them advice at the courthouse as to what to expect, the timing of it, like you go to court and then you can appeal. And then after the appeal, you'll pay a rent bond, etc. So we are hoping to at least increase our ability to do that. And that would hopefully reach more individuals after that. And then I did see a comment in the chat, and I do agree that so one thing that people don't always understand is that, and this is where we do try to educate landlords when we can, and educate judges and educate everybody, is that any filing goes against that tenant, even if they win. Every single time that landlord files, when their new landlord pulls their residential history report, it's going to show up as a filing. And right now, there's no way to expunge that like there is in the criminal world. There are some movements in the legislature to change that. But that is how it goes. I have, we've had clients with certain landlords that have been filed on every month that they have lived with a particular landlord, and they obviously stayed at that home because that's how they kept getting filed on. And in those cases, the landlord didn't have to dismiss the case. He could just, carry it over to the next month. And so, that's how we are, so even if we can prevent a filing, that helps. Or if there is a filing, and then we can work with the landlord and tenant to resolve it, and then hopefully prevent another filing in the future, because all those filings, they show up on people's records.
Dr. Birch, you have a question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Sarah, let's step back 2 spaces. You stated that a tenant had a check for $15,000. The landlord didn't accept it, but then they turned around and filed papers. Was there no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just wondering what was the reason, if you know what the reason was. I mean, I think I know it, and I'm pretty sure I do know. I just want to hear it.
Yeah, we have a few, in that particular case, the case was already on appeal. So they were already actively seeking possession of the home for the non-payment of rent. And so they did not want to, and legally, because of the way they filed, they don't have to accept that money. And so essentially they wanted possession of the unit instead of the money, and to keep the tenant in possession. And so that's why they didn't take it. So, and it would have even included like 2 or 3 months of prospective rent. But if they accepted the prospective rent, then of course, then they can't evict for non-payment of rent. And so, so yeah, that was their reasoning, is that, well, what they sort of told us is that they didn't want the money. They wanted possession. We hear that all the time right now.
And I
Which then to
understand
me
that.
doesn't even make sense, because then like most of our clients are judgment proof. So you're going to have to go through the process of getting a money judgment against them if you want to garnish anything. And if you send it to credit, well, credit's you're going to get pennies on the dollar if you're lucky in order to resolve it. So
Yeah.
I have a hard time. I mean, I don't understand why you would turn away a check for $15,000. And then on top of that, again, they are now trying to collect that past due money, even though our client was standing there with a check in hand for her whole past due amount.
That's
not an
what I can't understand. That's you would I mean, because to me that's just putting.
They just don't want to deal with the tenant anymore. They don't want to they don't want to go, have this issue with non-payment come up again. They recognize that the market is hot. They recognize they can jack the rent up $1,000, and they just want them out. And they know if they take that money, they have to wipe the slate clean and start over.
Yep,
But
absolutely.
it's just putting too much on this individual, because now they have to deal with the fact that they may be homeless, and then they have this judgment on them, and it's just too much.
I agree 100%, but it's happening every day. And I mean, I have clients coming in here in that real reality, at least 2 or 3 times a week, that are housed and at imminent risk of returning because of this very issue.
Are there any additional questions? Sarah, thank you very much for your presentation. A lot of very disturbing information, but we're so glad that the work that your team is doing on this problem. Commissioner Carter had put in the chat that perhaps the HSAC might want to sound the alarm to the city and county about imminent evictions without additional resources for rental assistance and other fees. And I think we can probably bring that up at our next executive committee meeting and have that discussion to decide how we want to move on that.
If I could just say one other thing, starting June 1st, we will have a permanent presence at the courthouse. And so we will be posted up on the 3rd floor, which is on the same hallway where most of the small claims eviction cases happen. We'll have an attorney down there from 8:30 until about 2. We'll probably then have another attorney down on the 2nd floor from about 2 until 5. And then we'll have at least 1, if not 2, support staff who are there on a daily basis to help us do intake and give advice. So starting June 1st, and we'll definitely make sure that we get the word out with that, and hopefully that will go out with any new filings, and so that people can reach out to us, at least get advice, and then depending on the situation and eligibility, we'd be able to represent them. Likely not right at first on the same day, but maybe with a day or two's notice. We can generally handle representation with less than 24 hours notice, but not necessarily right on the spot. So yeah, look forward to that. Again, that we hope to launch that June 1st.
Great, thank you. Russell Pierce commented that the ongoing present will be a great change. It's been a challenging for some tenants and landlords to get in contact with legal aid staff at the courthouse. So grateful for this change. Thank you again, Sarah, and thank you everyone for your comments and questions.
Helen, may I ask Sarah a question right quick? This is Angel. Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Hello.
So, is Duke law students and Jesse gonna be still coming out on Wednesday?
Yeah, we've been rotating that. I think that we still will, but I am not sure. So we're still going to have that discussion coming up soon.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for coming. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
And hopefully everyone in your house will be well very soon.
Fingers crossed. So far we're doing okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our next item, which is item number 7, CoC liaison appointment. CoC liaisons were appointed to the HSAC standing committees by the executive committee, and we are accepting another CoC liaison for policy and planning. We have Tammy Lawrence and Jerome Stevens that were appointed as CoC liaisons to the policy and planning committee, and Drew Wotan was appointed as the CoC liaison to the Performance Management Committee. There is one CoC liaison position available on the Policy and Planning Committee, as Casey Buchanan left the committee due to other commitments. So if you're interested in joining the Policy and Planning Committee, Teresa McCullers is the chair of that committee. Please use the form on the Durham CoC website. And I think Ruby can put a link in the chat for that form. There you go. Also, as a reminder, if you have not filled out the form for attendance, please be sure you do that. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the HSAC officer elections. Yes, it is coming up on that time again. So we are seeking nominations. As you may remember, the vice chair automatically moves into the chair position, but we have to hold elections for the secretary and the vice chair positions. Those are both elected positions. They do not automatically move up. Traditionally, the secretary has moved up into the vice chair, but unfortunately, Dr. Birch's term on the HSAC is ending and he will not be able to move up. So that puts us in a position of needing a secretary and a vice chair for the 2022-2023 HSAC officer elections. Those elections will be in August. So if you are interested in serving in either of those roles or want to nominate someone for those roles, please let us know. Are there any questions about that? Well, now we are in the announcements portion of our meeting. Does anyone have any announcements that they would like to make? Anything going on in the community you need to let us know about, or your agency, or?
Hi, Madam Vice Chair. I just wanted to make a quick announcement. For all HSAC members, if you can make sure, if you know within 24 hours of an HSAC meeting, to please fill out the excused absence request form so that we can track your attendance as well as get you an excused absence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Okay, well, our next HSAC meeting is June 22nd, 2022 at 3 p.m. as usual. And we look forward to seeing you all there. This meeting is adjourned. If I may have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Sorry about that.
So move, Madam Chair.
Dr. Bird, may I have a second?
Hey,
Come on, Ryan.
I second.
Okay, Alicia Thompson, all in favor may leave. The rest of you stay until Ruby closes the room.